Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello, folks. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's council meeting. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. The lands we know today as the Township of Centre Wellington have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Centre Wellington, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and in the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Centre Wellington remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations.
Thank you for that. Addendums and corrections to the agenda. Okay. Disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. I would just like to disclose, I believe it's item 7.7, where there's discussion of the parking strategy. There's just a potential for a pecuniary interest conflict for myself. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Presentations and announcements. I have something to speak to in terms of the planning committee at the County Council. We recently had a visit by Barclay Knapp, and I know some of you know Barclay. Very lovely person, talking about zoning for agricultural in Wellington County. He presented the committee a 21-page report that I'm hoping to bring to this council or have him come and speak to it. But it was mostly speaking about zoning within and the need to tighten up zoning and look at some planning issues within the county. There were 7 recommendations, and just to give you sort of the flavor of that, he indicated it as one of the 7 recommendations, pending the status of the proposed PPS 2023. The County of Wellington should continue to strengthen its policies to protect prime agricultural land with respect to settlement boundaries, expansion, and severance policies. And though we don't get involved in too much at the severance policy, we obviously are going through the boundary expansion. So again, it's the protection of agriculture. We had some folks from the GRCA talking about rural water quality program. I remember when it started back in 1999. And this was the annual report, and through the years, this program has funded 3,674 projects to the cost of about $30.3 million, which is fantastic, and obviously to protect rural water quality within the county, and all types of interesting programs, which were things like planting trees, all that enhancement of tree lines, a tremendous amount of programs. And again, I think this one would be also a good one to bring to a local council to show and have the GRC talk about that program, because it's done wonders in our community, and we've spent a lot of time and effort, and the participation of the agriculture community has been tremendous on that. And then the other one was, and I know I've had some discussions with some of the councillors on this, was brought forward through the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee. And this was sort of a kind of a thing in terms of not doing away with the free water testing. So we were one of the groups that were in favor of not getting rid of that program. So, anyways, those were some of the items at planning. Now I'll move on to councillors' committee updates. Is there any? Oh, anyway, I should ask any questions. Any questions to? Yes.
Just on that last piece, is there more information? Like, did Wellington County submit a letter or something, or
yes?
What do you mean by saying we're not in favor of it?
Yeah, it's a letter in support that we don't move ahead with that. So, Yeah, which is obviously we believe in and being able to local communities to be able to continue on the free water testing. So it's important for not only for our community but a number of I can't remember how many signatures on it. There was quite a few communities who were in favor of that. So, oh yes. So I'll go. Any other comments? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Is the GRCA going to come and give an update, like their annual report or their annual budget that we had last year?
Yeah, yes, I can ask that, but usually, typically, they come.
Yeah, I think
we can find out the timing of that and just let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, so why don't we move down to 5.2, Councillors Committee updates. Anyone to speak to that? Yes, Councillor Evoy.
Sure. Thank you so much. Through you, sir. A couple of things happening. Our Farm Safety Committee is doing some great work. We'll be meeting again this week, but they've been attending lots of fairs and events, agricultural events and farm shows over the last month or so. And from a DEI lens, on behalf of myself and Councillor Craddock, they are moving forward and are getting to a space where they look forward to making more formal discussions and have a stronger voice here at Council.
Very good. Any other? Yes, Councillor McDonald.
To Mayor Waters, economic development met last week. Economic development and prosperity. We had George gave us an update on tourism in Centre Wellington and how we're going to move forward, and it will be going out for an RFP on the whole package. There also was a little bit of an update on the business park, and that will be coming forward to council, I believe, later. I don't remember the exact date. In 2 weeks. Oh, sooner than I thought. Okay. I think that's about it for now.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Any other comments from council? Okay. Thank you for that. We'll go down to item number 6, delegations. We have none? No. And then item number 7, consent items. Agenda items are considered routine in nature and voted on collectively. However, any member of council may request 1 or 2 more items be removed from the consent item for separate discussion and or action. So I'll any questions or comments to the consent items? Yes.
For you, Mayor, I don't think I need to poll. I just had a question regarding the advisory committee minutes. Go ahead. I know our advisory committees have been working hard in establishing their working plans and stuff, and I'm not sure if any of those have been published, as well as some of the working groups. I do think that if you go to our website, some of our working groups of our advisory committees are laid out with membership and a bit of a description of what they're doing, and then others are not. So I'm just wondering if there are working plans, if those can maybe be shared with council and potentially some of those items looked at to make sure that all the information is updated on the website so we know what our working groups are involved in.
Any staff can speak to that?
Through Mayor Waters, yeah, we'll look into what's missing on the website and update that. And I know the working plans for each of the committees are based on the business plan that was approved by council at the beginning of the year. But if there's any detailed information to bring forward, we'll look into that.
Any other? Yes, Councillor Wilton, which one would you like to speak to?
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Just a couple of questions on report number 7.7. So I don't know if we want to look at that later when Councillor Jefferson needs to excuse herself.
Oh, yes, probably should. Yours is more just a general question. Okay. Okay. Yes, we can do that. Any other comments or questions as it relates to the consent items? Okay, okay. Seeing none, then I'll make a recommendation that Council of Township of Centre Wellington approve consent agenda items 7.1 through to 7.7. To
7.6.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Yeah, 7.6. My apologies. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Craddock, seconder on that. Councillor McDonald, all those in favor? So moved. Okay. So let's, if you would mind leaving, that would be great. Okay, a recommendation to the Council of Township of Centre Wellington approve consent agenda item 7.7. Do we have a mover for that? Yep. A mover on that, seconder on that. Councillor Welton, comments, questions?
Sorry, who did you have move?
Adams. Yep. Yep.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Waters. Just one minor question or comment and then a question. One is, I believe under the corporate strategic plan, we might be referencing the last term of council strategic plan for safe and well-maintained roads and infrastructure. So I think that might just need to be updated to reflect something in our current strategic plan, which might not match as well. But so that was a minor comment. And then I just had a question in general because there's a Fergus BIA meeting tomorrow, and I'm sure they'll be curious when the enforcement of the 3-hour parking limits is. So I know it's not directly in this report, but I'm just curious how that's going in terms of if that's happening June 1st or if there's a date in mind. So I don't know if someone can speak to that. Thank you.
Who would like to speak to that?
Did you want me? I
Yep.
can. I can.
Okay.
Through you, we are diligently working with Alpha. We believe there'll be a soft launch with warnings in mid-May, with full enforcement in effect June 1st.
Great, thank you. Just a follow-up. And how will that be communicated? So will that be a social media type thing that June 1st, the hourly enforcement starts, or the 3-hour and 15-minute zone starts?
Yes, we're going to generalize enforcement in general, that the enforcement program will start. So it's more than just the 3-hour, it's all parking violations. There will be a social media campaign. We have a meeting on Wednesday with the consultant to finalize everything, and then the campaign will start.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. Last year, we also had ticketing if you parked horizontal at the bottom of your driveway. So in some cases, residents need to get their cars off the road for whatever reason. And it was on some of the side streets in the subdivision. Is that neighbor-based? Like, is that complaint-based, or was that under this contract, is my question. Do you think?
Through you, generally the enforcement is in the downtown core areas and on private parking or private property, unless it's within like a safety issue. Perhaps they really stick to the core and private parking.
That's great information. Thank you.
Councillor Evoy.
Thank you, through you, sir. I'm curious with regards to the 30 signs, how that's broken up betwixt the two areas. That's a who question? John?
Welcome, John.
The detail right now is just whatever is needed in order to complete the signing to implement what's in the attachments. So yeah, I don't have a quantity of signs per se. That's in the report. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions pertaining to this item? Nope. Okay. We had a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Thank you. So those consent items move forward, and we'll wait for Councillor Jefferson to come back in. Okay, we'll move down to item number 8, consideration of reports. 8.1, GRC access agreement, and we have a report from our fire chief, Tom Mulvey. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mayor Waters, this report recommends that council delegates or authorizes the fire chief to execute or enter into agreement with the GRCA to use their properties for trading. The properties would include the Elora Gorge Park and the Elora Quarry. This is a report or an agreement that needs to be signed annually. And you've seen this in the past. The only thing different in this report that would also delegate the fire chief to execute the agreement in the future.
Comments or questions for Tom? Yes, Councillor McDonald.
I agree to this, of course. And the reason for it is that like our officers are going to get better training. You know, they're going to stand out a little bit better by having access to the gorge, but also for rescue operations, like the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. The Centre Moncton Fire Department has disciplines such as high angle and fast water and ice water, which requires the elements that are available in the Gorge Park and the quarry to do the proper training.
And for dogs too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions from council? Okay. Thank you, Tom. We have a recommendation. The Council of Township of Centre Wellington authorize the fire chief to execute a user agreement with the Grand River Conservation Authority for a temporary non-exclusive license to access the Elora Gorge and Elora Quarry conservation areas to hold general rescue training, and that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington delegates authority to the fire chief to execute this annual agreement in the future. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Evoy, seconder, Councillor McDonald. Comments or questions? No. All those in favor? So moved. We'll move down to item 8.2, Heritage Reserve Fund request, Heritage intern contract position, and we have Marianne to speak to that.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Through Mayor Waters, the report before you is basically a request to hire a contract for a Heritage intern position. And the reason for it, I'll explain, is because of the recent changes to the Ontario Heritage Act through Bill 23, municipalities are losing their ability to protect heritage properties from demolition and inappropriate alteration, which is currently afforded to listed properties. We call them listed, but they are non-designated properties that are on the municipal register. Essentially, what the changes to the Act have done is that going forward, municipalities will have 2 years to list a property on the municipal register. And if the property is not designated within those 2 years, so designation is protection by bylaw, and it involves a fairly intensive process. But if a property is not designated within those 2 years, then it must be removed from the register and cannot be added again for 5 years. So that is what was put into effect January 1st last year, 2023. And with the caveat that what was happening as well is if properties were already listed as of that date last year, that clock started. So the 2 years already started last year in January. So essentially we have till the end of this year to protect any of those properties through designation that are currently listed on the register. And just for some context, we have 1,052 total properties on the municipal register right now. 121 are designated, so they are protected by bylaw. And we have over 900, about 930 that are listed. So those are not protected properties. They are listed. And just to explain what listing is, it's a way of placing properties on this sort of a holding list where the property is considered to have cultural heritage value or interest potential. So the properties are put on that register as listed, non-designated properties to allow a 60-day review timeline for when an application comes in for demolition. So otherwise, if a property is not listed, the chief building official is required to issue a permit within 10 days. And that happened many, many years ago through Bill 124 in about 2006. So The Building Code Act changed so that a permit was required to be issued in 10 days for a residential and 20 days for commercial industrial type property. So it really tightened the timelines for building permit issuance. And at that time, that's when the province allowed us to add the non-designated properties to the municipal register to give them that 60-day interim protection from demolition. So we could review them and have the time to prepare a notice of intent to designate if we felt the property should be protected and for it to be evaluated, and then take that process to council. And that was applicable law. So the chief building official could not issue a permit within that 60 days if the property was listed. So that's what's really being taken away here. It's that ability to have that 60-day review window in order to review a property to see if it's worthy of designation. And so essentially from that, what municipalities are trying to do now is increase the number of designations to the extent possible. It does require extensive work. You have to do research, you have to evaluate the property, then you have to go through, consult the Heritage Committee, then come to council, request council issue a notice of intent to designate. There's a notice period. It has to go in the newspaper. And then there's appeal rights. And then finally, the bylaw gets passed after notice period. So this work is extensive. Staff are not able to do this amount of work to increase the number of designations. We did put together a work plan to try to better train the Heritage Committee members as well, because in the past, Heritage Committee members were the ones who often did the designations. The ones we have now, most of them were done by Heritage Committee members. So we did recently have a training session with a former Ministry of Culture staff who did a training on how to do designations so that we could try to in-house build that capacity to increase. So we are currently working on a few, but we do feel that staff feels that an intern position would really help us to get this moving more quickly. And really on that. So a position for approximately 4 months, we're requesting at a cost of about $15,000 to fund that 4-month position. And then there would be administrative costs associated with each designation. We are hoping to have, realistically, about 10 to 12 we could get done by fall this year. There is roughly an average of about 2 per municipality being done per year to date, because most municipalities have been focusing on increasing their registers so that they're more robust. That's what we've been doing here, but now this focus has shifted to designation. So we are hoping to designate 10 to 12 this year with the assistance of an intern, perhaps more if we can find more efficiencies and we can get the committee working as well. We could increase that number, but I just want to be realistic here and not overstate what we can accomplish. It does take a few months to get each one done, and costs about $1,500 just in terms of the newspaper notice and the legal fees required. So that's where we're getting the costs of $15,000 for the intern and approximately $18,000 to $20,000 in administrative costs, which we are hoping to be funded from the Heritage Reserve Fund. That right now we have, or at the end of last year, there was a balance of just over $194,000 in that reserve fund. And as you know, that is being funded from the allocations through the OLG, and hopefully on a yearly basis, as long as that continues. Just in addition, out of that fund, we are hoping to grant the monies from the Community Heritage Grant Program. So we received 15 applications this year and are hoping to disperse approximately $65,000 from the fund towards that program this year. And that was approved by Council in January. And so that would leave, with the costs of the Heritage intern and the administrative costs, for this year, we would just be under $100,000, leaving another $94,000 in the fund at the end of this year. And then the fund would be replenished, hopefully, in the following years. So we are also reviewing a staffing, a strategy through the budget process in order to allow the position for for a Heritage intern in the coming years, so yearly, through the Heritage budget, so that we have the capacity to keep increasing designations. And hopefully that helps helps us over time to increase the number. And just so you're aware too, Center Wellington is one of the highest per capita number of designations in the whole province. So we are doing really well, even with our 120, because that is a very high proportion for the number of buildings we actually have. So staff is requesting that council approve or authorize the release of that money through the reserve fund this year for that project. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mariana. Comments, questions, Councillor Wilton.
I just have a comment, actually. Thank you to you, Mayor Waters. Thank you, Mariana. I just really wanted to give you a compliment on your report. It was so nice and clear, and I could read the whole thing, and I didn't have to go looking for other information. So I just really appreciate the time you took to put this report together. It was very clear, and I'm all in favor of this recommendation as well. So thank you, Mariana.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. I guess more of a comment. I appreciate you doing the cross training first and utilizing all your resources in-house first, and then saying, okay, we have a lot of work here. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Efoy.
Thank you through you, sir. I echo my colleagues who appreciate your efforts. Thank you on the thing. A couple of questions and comments. One, knowing that our numbers are so much higher, is there a way to leverage that as we go forward from a tourist lens, potentially creating a map or something so that we can use it to help drive tourism, especially in that we are one of the highest, and we know that that's a very appealing it's an appealing factor for a lot of tourists. The other question is around looking at the numbers. I appreciate what you're saying. I definitely agree that having someone on staff is a good idea, especially if it's going to find a way to also pay us back with regards to tourism. But with the list, so what I'm hearing is you're either on or off, and that means we're at risk of, for lack of better language, losing 1,000. Is there a way for the township or the county to create an unofficial list that will, at the very least, encourage people to look twice? Maybe we create a way somehow that, you're on that list, and that means, we do want to look just a little bit closer, but it's not obviously legally it's either on or off. Is there a way to create something in between?
Thank you for the questions. Through you, Mayor Waters. So first question about tourism. Yes, we can leverage our current list and designated properties that we have. We have been working in the past on walking tours and brochures, and that is increasing this year through our work plan. So we do have an education subcommittee, and we are working on that. We're also going to be at the Lions Home Show in a couple of weeks. So we're going to be out talking to the community about the importance of designation, what it means, and also that there's now grant money for people to be improving designated properties. And again, that grant program has triggered some people to request designations. So we are getting the word out there, and I think it will increase our capacity and increase the ability to relay some of this for tourism and for the community itself. The list itself, so the second question regarding the list, it used to be called an inventory. So before all these properties were added to the municipal register, the register is the official name and the official list that the clerk must keep in a municipality. But before they were called heritage inventories, and they were done through the local architectural conservation advisory committees. We reviewed our inventory and decided which properties were going to be put on the official register. So we only took about half. So there is what I would call an old inventory approach. So what I think we might do is keep this unofficial list. We could call it an inventory. So basically what happened was the properties were put on, and now we're just kind of removing them, but they're just going to probably stay on another list called an inventory. So we won't lose the information. We'll have it there. And we're going to have to obviously come up with some systematic approach of how we're going to start adding properties again that we can add either in 5 years after they're removed or ones that were never added. And we've been working you may not be aware because this happened in 2017. We added about 400 properties to the register that were listed non-designated because we were working on making the register more robust. But we, I think, can turn our mind to some of those rural properties also that we hadn't added because that was our ongoing project the past few years until now everything has shifted again. But we will certainly be looking at having an unofficial list and then also adding those properties that were never on the list. So we do have an approach and we are working through the work plan as to how to get that done.
Any other comments, questions from council? Thank you, Mariana. Okay. We have a recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington receive staff report PLN 2024-16 for information, and that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington authorize the use of the Heritage Reserve Fund for Heritage Intern Contract Position and associated administrative costs to assist with specific heritage project as outlined in staff report PLN 2024-16. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton. Seconder on that, Councillor Evoy. Comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. We'll move down to item 8.3, agreement for operating a concession booth at Centre Wellington Community Sportsplex. And who is going to, I see Matt Tucker. He's going to, I'm assuming, speak to this. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Waters. Yeah, it's great to see everyone here. In March 2020, our concessions closed due to COVID. And since then, they have been closed just because of financial implications. So going through, try to figure out a plan moving forward because we hear more recently that people are wanting the concession open and love that arena food. So back March 29, 2023, the township invited service clubs, individuals, local sports groups, and businesses submit an expression of interest just to operate the concession booth in Fergus, the Sportsplex. On May 17th, the expression of interest closed and the township received one interested party. And after negotiating back and forth, unfortunately, it didn't move forward. They just do with the agreement that was put in place. So this past season, it started up and staff started hearing a lot more noise and hungry people wanting some French fries and all that great stuff in the booth. We decided to open up that expression of interest one more time because just through Facebook, that's where we were hearing a lot of the interest. And with that, the township received 2 respondents. And in April, we sat down with the 2 respondents through a competitive process. And basically through that process, we ended up with a successful candidate to run our concession booth. And that's, I know the individual is really excited. And I know as staff, and I think for the community, they're really looking forward to have that booth open again.
Thank you, Matt. Comments, questions? Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Just curious, I'm all in favor of getting the booth up and running again, and this sounds like a good solution. I'm just curious about the what if eventuality, if the contract comes to an end for whatever reason, if what the plan would be then and how if the would come back to council at that point.
For sure. And in the agreement, it starts off as a 1-year agreement. I know staff really want this to work. And giving it a year, we're hoping just through that year, just sort of get the pros and cons as that season goes through to help continue the business to keep on going.
Yes, Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. Are we going to look at something like this for the Jefferson Community Center?
Good question.
Yeah.
Through you.
I wasn't sure what the plans were.
Yeah, so the way the Jefferson Melora Community Center was set up, there was a pass-through window set up in the kitchen, and the thought behind that was really to have some of the sports groups use that area for fundraising. We found the financial implications with just a single ice pad really difficult to make ends meet, whereas the Sportsplex with more and more programming in our halls and just with the 2 ice pads in the pool, there's a lot more activity to be successful.
Any other comments, questions from council? Okay, thank you, Matt. Oh, we're in another question, yes? Councillor Wilton? Oh, okay. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through. Yeah, no, fully in support of this. Also, just was unsure about the alternate. So, you're saying it's a 1-year agreement. It will come back to council then? Like, yeah.
Huh?
Thanks. I have to thank Matt for taking this report. Our coordinator has worked on this report, on this process. Stephanie Rogers, big shout out to her, but she's homesick today. So Matt stepped up this morning and said, I'll take the report. So thank you. Just to answer that question, I think if this contractor is successful, then we're off to the races. If for any reason they are unsuccessful and they back out of the agreement or it doesn't work, I think we'd have to look at the root cause of why it didn't work and make a decision whether we recommend moving forward with another third party or whether we'll recommend to close the booth for good. But that is for the future to determine. So we'll have to look at the root cause. And it's not to guarantee we will come back in a year, because if this works well, there are wording in the contract to roll it over.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Efoy.
Yes, sir. Just a quick question for clarity. So if vendor A has success, there will be no opportunity for vendor B or C to try and take that if they get a good year. Other opportunities won't be open to other groups?
The opportunity was during the expression of interest for you to apply to operate this booth. So I'm trying to remember if there is no opportunity right now within the agreement that we would terminate or revisit a new vendor at this time. However, I would have to look at the procurement policy and get back to you on that when that would possibly come up. But I can share that for somebody to take on this, they're going to be investing a lot of their own resources into operating this booth, staff, etc. So if they're successful, then we want to make sure that they continue. It's, I think, in the case where they're not successful, we would have an alternative. But I can maybe reach across to my counterpart, or we'll have to get back to you on if there's a new expression of interest or RFP opportunities. That's your question?
Yes, it is. May I follow through with that? Just for clarity, then I would like to see something like that, even if it's a 2-year agreement or something. If new businesses come into town and want an opportunity, they weren't here this time to ask. I just want to make sure that we remain as equitable as possible to all of our businesses. So I would like to see, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I would rather see, yes, we will after 2 years or whatever the case may be.
Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Just as a follow-up kind of on that discussion, I'm actually more concerned with the fact that the alternative was that the booth would be closed and not and the space repurposed. So the reassurance I'm looking for is that if this contract falls through for whatever reason, things change in people's lives, so you never know what happens with a small business, that it would come back to council and that we'd have more options than just close the booth or reopen it, because there might be other options a year from now, or we don't know, or 18 months from now, or 2 years from now. So my interest is more in making sure that the booth remains a viable opportunity for the community.
I'll just add that we would not permanently close the booth without coming back to council and coming back with options or at that time. We'll see how the future goes.
Councillor Adams, did you have a, okay. Any other comments, questions from council? Thank you, Matt. We have a recommendation of the Council of Township of Centre Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a lease agreement with Something Fishy, Sharon Gamble, owner, to operate the Centre Wellington Community Sportsplex concession booth, Sportsplex concession. Do we have a mover on that?
Sorry, for clarity, sir. I would like to see something on there that says we will, whether it's 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, I want to make sure that it doesn't remain in one vendor's hands in perpetuity.
I'm looking for our staff in terms of how do we have a.
I think that would be an amendment to the main motion, and you would need a seconder for that amendment. Then we vote on the amendment, and then the initial motion.
5 years. I just don't want to leave it forever.
So I'm going to suggest that's an amendment. And if you can get a seconder, then we can move forward with the amendment.
I'll look at Pat first.
Yep, sorry. It's great when staff are watching the meeting because I just got a note here from our procurement manager. We have 2 additional optional years. So after that, we can open it up. So this contract, it states out how long it runs, and then we have an opportunity. So I don't think we need to include it in the motion. Thanks.
Okay, so I read the motion. We had who did the first on that?
You've seen it.
Okay, do I have a mover on that? Councillor Evoy, seconder on that. Councillor Adam. Any further and we heard our discussion and Pat's input. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Just for reassurance, I would like to suggest an amendment that's, I think, fairly simple and speaks to what Pat and Matt have both brought forward, but just that should this contract come to an end, the staff will bring a report back to council for review and consideration of next steps. But I want it.
Yes.
Okay, is that okay for first and second as a friendly amendment? Yeah. All right, is that included as a friendly amendment by first and second? Yes, okay. Maybe I should read this again so we're all
I didn't get it all.
okay. Do you need a little time to finish that, or do you want me to?
Well, perhaps if Councillor Wilton could say it again, I might get the tail end of it.
Sure. And that should this contract come to an end, that staff will bring a report back to council for review and consideration of next steps. I can send it to you.
Let me just read that again. That the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a lease agreement with Something Fishy, Sharon Gamble, owner, to operate the Centre Wellington Community Sportsplex concession booth, Sportsplex concession, and that this contract should come to an end. That the staff will bring back a report for consideration of next steps.
If you send it to me, we'll print it up.
Sent it.
Sorry, can I get some clarification on it is already coming back in a couple of years? So I'm not understanding why we need to do this amendment now. I think it's been made clear by staff that it is coming back in our procurement process and our procurement policies. So I'm not understanding why we need that in this motion now.
Well, we had a friendly amendment that just put it in
Right.
there, and in some ways it doesn't change anything, but I wasn't going to beat you up on the friendly amendment. So it's now part of the whole thing. So my suggestion is just not to confuse it any more than it is. We'll just leave that as is if that's okay. So we had a first and we had a seconder. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? So moved. Thank you. Okay. Looking around there, Matt. Item 8.4. Ice resurfacer purchase.
Through you, based on council's comments to move the electric in the 2023 budget, staff deferred the purchase of a new ice resurfacer by a year in order to increase the budget to purchase an electric ice resurfacer. Staff are bringing this report to council to confirm this purchase, given the cost difference between a propane and an electric ice resurfacer. Staff are recommending the purchase of a new electric ice resurfacer because one of the big things is zero emissions and also cost efficiencies. Currently, The township ice resurfaces are run by propane, which obviously creates emissions in an indoor atmosphere. An electric machine is run by battery, which has no emissions. The initial cost of an electric ice surfer is higher, but there'll be significant savings in fuel and maintenance costs over the years. Calculating maintenance fuel costs, it's been estimated to be about 9 years to offset our initial investment. The ice resurfacer at the Laura Jefferson Community Center is basically changed out every 15 years. So it's sort of the life of an ice machine. And through this process, the township's a participant of the Canoe LIS purchasing program, which was chosen as a procurement process for this purchase. And I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Matt. Comments, questions? Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters. I had the opportunity to meet Canoe Procurement Group down at Good Roads, and I like the way that they procure things. So I do see AMO definitely has had involvement in this recommendation as well. What is the life expectancy of the battery? Because, we're kind of looking at what happens to the batteries after 10 years and where do we put them? Do we put them in the ground? What do we do? Yep. So that will be on us.
Oh, right? Great question. Yeah. And through you, there's two types of batteries. One is the typical acid battery, and then there's the other lithium ion battery. The average lifespan for an acid battery is 5 years, and a lithium is 10 on average. Okay.
Councillor Wilton.
Great. No question this time, just a comment. And again, thank you for the report. It was very thorough, and I like the additional information, and I'm really glad to see that you kind of responded to some of our conversations through the budget process and bringing this forward. And in addition to the net zero thing, I think the reduction in indoor air pollution is really important. So I'm really excited to see that moving forward. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from council? Okay, thank you, Matt. Seeing none. Recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington approves the award of an electric Zamboni ice resurfacer to Zamboni Company Limited in the amount of $149,407.00. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor McDonald, seconder on that. Councillor Adams, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Thank you. We'll move down to item 8.5, the Termite Management Service Update, report by Adam.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. And through you, the purpose of this report is to provide council with an update regarding the termite management program for the township. Staff have been actively engaged in discussions with the council-endorsed vendor since September of last year in an attempt to negotiate an agreement palatable by both parties. Regrettably, however, negotiations have failed. Licensing and availability of the product that was a cornerstone of the previous proposal has introduced complications to the proposed project scope, timelines, cost, and administration of the program. Staff are now seeking council direction for the future of the termite management program and are recommending engaging in discussions with a known supplier licensed to utilize the Centricon product in Canada. The purpose of the supplier engagement would be to determine the vendor's willingness to participate in a termite program for the township and determine potential scope of the service provision, preferred pricing options, or other opportunities to effectively address termites within the confines of Centre Wellington. Should discussions with the vendor suggest a viable termite management program exists, township staff would recommend reserving the option of conducting a survey of the property owners identified in the 2020 study to glean if owners would be willing to participate in the termite management program utilizing the Centricon product, if property access would be granted to facilitate the program execution, and if not willing to participate, the rationale for opting out. And I'm happy to field any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Adam. Councillor McDonald.
Through your Mayor Waters, I was super happy to see this on the agenda today. Quick question, if we're using the data from 2020, we've had a lot of movement in housing. Lots of people have moved, changed, and so is that the reason for doing, another survey, sort of to get that extra data?
Sure. No, ultimately it would be to determine whether or not the property owners would be comfortable leveraging a program that was centralized around the Centricon product. Ultimately, this resides on private property, so it would be kind of gleaning the level of interest to determine whether or not the program would be viable using this product.
Okay, and I imagine there'll be an education portion around that for those that don't understand what Centricon is.
Yeah, and again, I think that's largely why we're requesting council authorization to engage with a vendor of this product to kind of get a little bit more information so we can formulate a pathway forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Eveling.
Through you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that we are continuing to honor the decision of this council to move forward with this. I am concerned around timing, however. What if they say no? What if the new homeowners don't get back to you in time? What if they have that lack of understanding? I am genuinely concerned about how, and I'm looking to you to see if you have a timeline of when you strive to get started with the program.
Well, ultimately, I understand because we do have kind of a winter climate here that the opportune time is between kind of spring and fall for any kind of project engagement. Staff, being that we're already into springtime, we're going to require a bit of time to engage with the vendor to determine whether or not there is a viable program option available. But as soon as we have more information, we'd be bringing a report back to council for further direction.
Thank you for clarifying. So I just to clarify for our viewers and our neighbors who are concerned, the likelihood of getting it done this season, are we looking at we sure hope it's a 70 or a 20? What do you think we're looking at? Not to hold you accountable in that respect, but on this season, is there hope that it might?
With anything, I would kind of level that it would be predicated on a best efforts basis, but it would be too premature for me to determine whether or not there's viability with this program without having had any conversations with these vendors.
Further comments, questions from council? Okay. Thank you, Adam. We have a recommendation that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington receive report Core 2024-23 for information, and that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington direct staff to enter discussions with Aetna Pest Control to determine potential scope of service provision, preferred pricing options and/or opportunities to effectively address termites in Centre Wellington, and further that the Council of Township of Centre Wellington provide staff the option of conducting a survey property owners to identify in the 2020 study to determine ongoing termite management program viability based on discussions with pest control vendor. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Craddock, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Thank you for that. We'll move down to item 8.6, Strategic Plan 2024 review. And as you can see, Dan is moving into the hot seat.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. This report pertains to the review we did to the strategic plan that was put in place last year. If you'll recall, back when the strategic plan was passed, there was a resolution added to conduct an internal review and refresh prior to the 2025 budget process. So to do that, we created a survey that was sent to both members of council and to staff to ask about how well this strategic plan is working and if there's any potential edits or refinements that need to be made. The recommendation is attached to my report, and we've tried to track changes in a sense to see what the recommended changes would be to the strategic plan. I would say for the most part, most of the recommended changes are just really added words of clarification to reiterate what was meant in different areas. There was one area that I would say is a more substantial change, and that is under economic prosperity. We added a new priority, support and attract business development, retention, and expansion. This was something that was brought up by both a member of council and by staff that was missing from our strategic plan, and that relates to, for example, the ongoing work we're doing with the Fergus Business Park, for example, and trying to bring new businesses to Center Wellington and to keep the businesses we have in Center Wellington. So that piece was missing and mentioned by a number of parties to be added in. We also had a few comments from staff in and around the actual goals themselves. If you recall from our development of the strat plan, we have 5 goals, and within the 5 goals, there are a number of different priorities under each goal. Some of the comments from staff were that in the past, they were used to items like infrastructure and good financial management being a goal of the township, where now they really make their way into the priorities of the township, which is really one step down from goals. And we had some discussions on this at the senior team level, and we completely agree with that assessment. But by adding or changing goals at this point, we would have to recommend a full restructuring of the strategic plan. And I don't think that's something we recommend doing at this point in time. So we did not make any of those changes. But through the identification of these items in the priorities section, we'll try to put as much emphasis on them as possible in the next few years. With that, we are looking for approval of the revised strategic plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for that. Comments, questions? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, I would just say one comment on your last comment there. I think sitting around during the strategic planning, I would hope that those do remain goals of our council. I think for me, a lot of those things that you just spoke with, the effective financial management and our infrastructure, a lot of those are legislated, and they're like a part of our critical services that we must provide. So I kind of just take that as, that's our job. That's what we're all here for. And then using kind of the strategic goals as, adding on to those critical, our critical responsibilities, and then adding on to what else do we want to do and what else do we want to focus on in our community. So I totally understand where you're coming from, but I think that's where I think my mind was when we were there. I don't think I see those as lower. I think those are always there. Just one comment about the actual changes that we're looking to include. I don't generally have too much concerns. I noticed in 2 areas the word support was added, though, and I think in a lot of our contexts I just would like to know, what do we mean by support? Because I think a lot of times when we hear support in this chamber, it means financial support. And is that what we're committing to here?
Through Mayor Waters, specifically support is added in economic prosperity, where we're talking about business retention and expansion, and then support is added in activity, health and wellness when we're talking about arts and culture. So I would suggest in both cases, we do have financial programs that are available both to arts and culture and to, like, through our community impact grant program, and through our CIP program, we have grants and incentives available to the businesses as well. So I would suggest in both of those cases, it could be financial or it could be non-financial.
Yes, Councillor Adams.
I just don't know if that was the intention of there. Like, I on the economic prosperity, I can see where maybe that is. Obviously, we want to support all we can, but I don't know if are we leaving groups then out of that if we kind of add that support word. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'd like to hear from my colleagues as well.
Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor. So when we did the strat plan last year, we spent a lot of money doing this and we agreed to just tweak it as we go along. So I don't want to change it too much that we're going to incur costs of lots of time and input, because then it's looking like we're doing it without accessing the public, which we did that in the first place. So I have concerns about that. I guess moving forward, I agree, especially with the governance changing of wording. Generate sustainable and diverse revenue sources that can be incorporated into long-term financial planning. I agree with changing that wording for sure. That was one thing that popped out to me, including the environmental stewardship. Develop proactive climate change strategies. I like that too. But I do caution changing too much, because then we're altering the complete strat plan. I've worked with many strat plans in my life. You know, one of them we're 6 years into it because it's working so well. So I think it's okay to change things, but if it's too much, then I'm looking at how much time you're spending on it, staff are spending on it, because I'm also watching the budget this year. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you. And through Mayor Waters, we were very mindful of that as well when we were bringing forward changes. We didn't want to change the original intent that came up through the public consultation process, as well as what council and staff had referred to when we developed the original plan. And this resolution, I believe, only refers to one review and refresh now before the 2025 budget. I don't think there's an intent to do another review. It would be a new strategic plan by the next term of council. That would be the next review.
Councillor Evelyn.
Thank you. Through you, sir. Actually, to both my colleagues' point, I agree that it's absolutely essential and somewhat a given that we're going to support attracting new businesses. And I do agree that support does suggest financial engagement. And so, although I agree with the first one, I hadn't really thought of it, and I completely agree that when we say support and encourage arts and culture, are we missing out on other things like sports or any other group that might come into mind? And I do agree with both of them, changing them and tweaking them and looking at our budget. I think it does suggest when we say support and encourage arts and culture, I love the word encourage, but I wonder if there's a third word that we haven't yet found that says we will continue to uphold their efforts. But I do kind of agree with the support word in that case.
Any other comments, questions from council?
No. Thank you, through you, Mayor Waters. Thank you for your work on this. Appreciate it. And I know when I submitted my comments on the survey, I did have a comment on the welcome and accommodate tourism and tourists. Just that I wondered if we should finesse that a little bit to encourage the adoption of a municipal accommodation tax, to make it clear that there'd be a connection between our tourism sector helping to pay for tourism. And I'm not sure if maybe Adam's changed to that sustainable revenue, diverse sustainable revenue. I have to scroll too much in the governance section might account for that, but I was just concerned that maybe we're not connecting the dots between trying to look for tourism to help pay for tourism. So I don't know if there was any wording from various iterations that could link that, or if there could be some type of note there, but that was one comment.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. And through Mayor Waters, the change on the governance page was intended to cover things like the municipal accommodation tax. It's talking about really finding a diverse set of revenue to help us become more efficient. So that's corporate wide, but from a tourism perspective, it takes initiatives like a municipal accommodation tax to make that work. So staff know that's implied through this, and it'll come up through future business plans as an initiative.
Okay. Any other comments or yes, Councillor Wilton?
Yeah, just another comment in general around strategic planning. The one thing I feel frustrated with this strategic plan and have nothing to do with staff, but with the way it was put together, was that there's no actions and there's no sense of a measurable action plan associated with this. So I know staff have had to go and do the business plan as a complementary document, which I find is a little extra layer of work. Whereas if we could get in, I would recommend for the next term of council, we're not doing it now because it's cost and everything. That a lot of strategic plans, what you're looking for is that measurable and actionable goals and items. So that I find missing here. So there's some priorities that are quite broad. So even the support and encourage arts and culture, there's so many nuances to that without actionable, measurable goals. It's challenging to see how we'll measure our success at the end of this term of council. So I'll just express that as a comment and an observation. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And through Mayor Waters, that's really the intent of developing the business plan, that we can have actionable items for staff to work on that are recommended by staff, approved by council, and then we provide almost like a report card to show progress. So yes, it's a separate document, but it sort of goes hand in hand with the strategic plan.
Yes, Councillor Evoy.
Sorry, through you, sir. Just a question then for clarification. So in that there has been a fair bit of discussion on that word support with regards to arts and culture. What is the next steps before we are we being asked to approve this to you, CAO Wilson? Are you asking us to approve these changes today, or are you going to make, like, we don't want to add a whole bunch of work to your plate, but there does seem to be a fair bit of discussion around a couple of items.
Through Mayor Waters, I'm wondering if there's a fix we can suggest now so that we can get this approved. But for example, under activity, health and wellness, the original item was encourage arts and culture. We could go back to the original wording of encourage arts and culture rather than support and encourage. And under economic prosperity, just say attract business development, retention, and expansion rather than support.
So how are we looking to, is that just sort of an understanding, or do you want a more formal recognition of that? You're good? Councillor Adams.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I think, support, obviously we're here to be supportive of a lot of these. It's not to not support, but I think it's just, this is like our action plans, and then it's through different reports and stuff that come to council that we actually do our support. I just wanted to kind of clarify that. So I would be willing to move an amendment to remove the word support and adopt all other recommendations as presented. I'm fine with both instances just to keep it consistent, but
Councillor Evoy.
May I humbly, through you, suggest a quick vote, because I'm okay with keeping support with regards to business, because we are already committed to finding ways and spending money to bring and attract and retain business. So I'm personally okay with that version of the support, because we are committed to that as a council. I think for me, I would just want to, and again, thanks for clarifying for anybody who's listening that of course we support arts and culture, but yeah, I would like to just see that one word in that one place changed.
So would we like that more formally considered? Okay, I'll just go through all these first. Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. I just wanted to point out that under economic prosperity, we also have support agriculture and agri-food businesses. And I'm thinking also in that stipulation that we can leave the support for the other two areas, because we were under the understanding of being able to support agriculture and that within our own means. So I'm figuring that using the word support again repetitively would be falling underneath the same circumstances that we had come to at our strat planning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do we leave as is the recommendation, given there seems to be a lot of support in there? I'm thinking that, that's probably the way we should go. So I'm seeing some head nods that way. So I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation that the Council Township of Central Wellington approve the updated 2023 to 2026 strategic plan as outlined in report CAO 2024-09 dated May 13, 2024. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Craddock, do I have a seconder on that? Councillor McDonald, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. Thank you very much for everyone's participation that way. Okay, item number 8.7, reserve and reserve fund policy update. And we'll welcome Adam back to the front desk there.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. And again, through you, the report before council pertains to the township's reserve and reserve fund policy and is supplemental to the report received by council for information on April 29th regarding the 2023 operations of the township and the associated surplus. Municipal reserves and reserve funds are an important long-term financial planning tool used to set aside funds to meet future funding requirements. And having reserve and reserve fund policy in place provides guidance for township staff in preparing the annual budgeting and capital budgets. This report identifies proposed changes to the existing reserve and reserve fund policy, most notably the inclusion of a termite management reserve fund, which was endorsed by council as part of the 2024 budget process, the addition of a new reserve to be used for tax rate stabilization. This reserve will provide a source of funding for planned and unplanned tax-supported operational pressures. In addition to these additions, staff are proposing the following. Number one, transfer funds from the general capital reserve to various reserves, including the contingency reserve, the employee future benefit reserve, the legal matters reserve, and the new tax rate stabilization reserve to meet recommended funding targets for individual reserves. Number two, transfer from the insurance claim reserve and the CWCI loan reserve to the general capital reserve, again, to meet recommended funding targets. And lastly, transfer funds from the WSIB ABO reserve to the WSIB excess loan reserve to fund, again, supported recommending funding targets. When factoring these recommended transfers in the 2023 surplus allocation to the general capital reserve, the net impact is an increase to the general capital reserve in the amount of $1,058,939, which will support future planned and unplanned tax-supported capital projects. A more fulsome report on the funds available for 2025 budgeting purposes will be presented at 2025 Budget Direction Report at the council meeting of June 10th, and I'm happy to field any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Adam. Comments, questions? Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters, I appreciate being proactive on this because we have seen increases in our capital projects that, unexpected ones. So this is great. My question is, do we have enough WSIB funds for future? Like we're covering ourselves off? You don't see any worries there?
No real worries. We are trying to build the WSIB category in terms of the excess loss. That has a fairly significant funding target, as you can see through the actuarial reports, which are supplemental to this report. But we're slowly building that, and this transfer, it's kind of a push-pull between the ABO and the reserve we previously mentioned. So we do continue to build that, and over the last couple of years, we've made some fairly significant headway in terms of funding that. But in terms of operationalizing it, no real emergent needs coming from it right now.
Any other comments? Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. One thing that I thought was a little bit unknown when I was reading the report was like, how are we trending as compared to like last year? Are we trending more away from our targets or towards our targets? And I noticed in the summary that was sent, the attachment that was sent to us today, it was one of the recommendations, I think, in that report was to include those kind of targets.
The target,
whether they're,
sorry.
yeah.
No.
And I'm just kind of curious if we've implemented the other recommendations of that report.
I'm sorry, which report are you referring to?
The one that was just sent today. The actual, was it the, no?
Yeah, the missing.
The missing attachments.
Yes, the Watson study. Yes, the recommended targets have been in place now for some time, and the recommendations stemming from the Watson report, I think most notably are kind of the tax rate stabilization reserve, which we're putting in place for this term of council, given the surplus that we were kind of subject to for 2023 has afforded us the opportunity to build on that. For the most part, a lot of our funding targets have been met, and some of the transfers between the different reserves outlined in this report and the subsequent schedules kind of facilitate those funding targets. And for the ones where we continue to build, it's going to be an iterative process over a number of years. But en masse, I would suggest we're in a very good position.
So in follow-up, like in future reports, would it be too much work to like include a column or add a note on each column of whether we are now, like I said, like whether we're moving away from our target or whether we're
sure, just in terms of trending?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
we can certainly bake that in.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Wilton?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Waters, a couple questions. So I had one question about the wind turbine capital reserve for use for Bellwood area capital projects. I'm just curious if there's any current plans for that, those funds. So that'd be one question. I don't know if you want to answer them one at a time.
I'm not certain that it has been specifically earmarked just yet, but I would defer to staff if anyone else has heard anything else further in terms of the requirements of that one.
Through Mayor Waters, there are conversations at a staff level about potential use of that, and it'll come forward to council for consideration at some point. But relating to some of the ongoing discussions around different initiatives in Bellwood, so stay tuned. We'll be back with recommendations on that.
Thank you. And my other question was around the Community Partner Reserve Fund, currently showing a negative balance of, I think that's 60 or 80,000. So I'm just curious what exactly that fund is for and why it's negative, and if there's plans to change that, and just a little more detail on that fund. Thank you.
Yeah, the Community Partner Fund was initiated, I believe it was in 2023, and it was predominantly used and driven into a negative position to facilitate the onboarding of an individual on staff who's going to really run with that particular program. So it was subject to continued and ongoing contributions, but it came into a deficit position just to get the program out of the gate.
Thank you. And my other question, kind of the bigger question, is when I look at the list of funds that we have, I see things for trucks and I see things for insurance and things for, all the necessities of that. But one big necessity, and I believe it is a really important one, is parks and recreation facilities. So new or enhanced parks and recreation facilities. My understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I had 2.5 days to try and absorb all this information, is that largely would be found in the Development Charges Reserve Fund, which is currently sitting at about $29 million. And that is linked closely to the Development Charges Background Study, which I think is true, which shows things like $5 million in 2030 for an indoor turf training facility and things like that. So I'm just curious if all of the parks and recreation needs of our community as we're growing so rapidly are adequately covered in our current reserve fund program, or if we should be creating a new development or a new reserve fund that would be specifically allocating money to parks and recreation facilities moving forward.
Excellent question. And through you, Mayor Waters, kind of a multifaceted response, I guess, to that one. Development charges can be used for growth-related infrastructure projects and for that alone. So for the purposes of rehabilitation, we would lean on the General Capital Reserve, which funds all of our tax-supported capital needs. So with that, we do see kind of the $1 million contribution to that based on all the allocation that we're coming into this year. And obviously through the budgeting process, that gives this council opportunity to kind of find what those projects should be and where they reside on the priority listing, be it Parks and Rec or other tax-supported requirements. So with that, that would be my comment around that. We're kind of tied in terms of the utilization of the development charges and the development charges defined within the confines of our 2021 study. I do think we have adequate funding, and we will be subject to another DC study kicking off next year for the purposes of a requirement for 2026 on the 5-year cycle currently. So with that, I think there's opportunity to kind of enhance or address additional needs from a growth-related perspective for Parks and Recreation kind of categorization of services provided by the township. And some of that will come through the master planning process that we're currently underway with to facilitate future DC requirements and our studies and the contributions to those services.
Through Mayor Wilton, Mayor Waters. To add what Adam was saying, the master plan, the Parks and Rec master plan, is really tied to the development charge study. So all the projects in the master plan are in the DC study. So that's why we try to do the master plan first and then the DC study second, so that the two tie together. So we're doing that this as well. So we're doing the Parks and Rec master plan this year. That'll feed into the DC study next year. So the two really have to go hand in hand. So if our growth related needs for Parks and Rec go way up in the master plan, then you're expected to see your DC rate for Parks and Rec go way up as well.
Just one clarification on that, and I appreciate the extra explanation, but in the previous development charge background study, we had a need of $27 million shown in the Parks and Recreation needs of the community, and we identified 14 million and change in future growth capital in the development charge study. So I'm just curious why that was such a lower number, and if we would be avoiding that in the future and making it match more appropriately.
Through Mayor Waters, the larger number is a calculated number in the DC study, and it's based on the 10-year average level of service. So that is, in a sense, setting the ceiling on what can go in the DC study from a Parks and Rec perspective. But the projects identified in the master plan were less than that. So that's why there's a difference between the two. You can go up to the ceiling, but you need to justify what you're putting in there. There has to be an identified need that has been approved by council to make its way into the DC study.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, through you. So that was the previous master plan you're speaking about, Parks and Rec. So in the current RFP, which just closed, right? Well, it was awarded the end of April. So Part B, so there's like the master plan, needs assessment, and then the master plan, but then a Part B of that was the feasibility study for the indoor multi-purpose recreational facility, which was also an item in the previous master plan. So I agree with all Councillor Wilton's comments, but I am wondering if, would it be, that need has already been identified, like we're having the feasibility study, but would it be appropriate to earmark a certain amount of that? Because that's a project that can be pulled out separately. I thought that's how it was kind of explained. So, sorry. So would it make sense to pull a portion? We have a project, we have a feasibility study coming up. It's just been awarded. Would it make sense to pull some from the general reserve into a dedicated reserve for a potential indoor multi-purpose recreational facility, since it's a current project?
Through Mayor Waters, I would suggest we need to wait and see what the feasibility study says. The feasibility will address the feasibility of building this facility, as well as we can outline the funding mechanisms in the same report. So I think it's a little too premature at this point to start deciding on funding when the study hasn't been completed yet.
I think I'm just not understanding like the harm, because obviously this time next year, if the report came back and said it's not feasible, would we not then come back next year and just transfer that amount back? So I'm just trying to get an idea of like what the harm is. with doing that. I understand that it hasn't been determined yet. Like, I'm clear on that portion, but.
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I would just comment that that's why we have the general capital reserve in place, and it's for supporting any capital requirements that are not growth related, that are also a tax supported item. So within the confines of that, with this $1 million contribution for this year, we're effectively building that and having those funds available for future use. It also comes with a retention of $1.25 million just for kind of items that come up. So should it become a more pressing priority, that affords us some flexibility in that. And it will come forward and based on the feasibility study and the prioritization in future budget items.
Through Mayor Waters, and to add to Adam's comments, you'll notice we don't have a specific reserve for roads either. A number of years ago, when we did a reserve policy, we went to more broader reserves and reserve funds, and that allows us the flexibility of maybe focusing on a Parks and Rec project one year and then a major road project the next year. So using the general capital reserve allows us to do that, where having very specific reserves, which we've had in the past, really pigeonhole you into a certain approach.
Councillor Walton, did you have a further comment or? Yep. Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Evoy.
You, Mayor Waters, it's just a comment. I would love a roads reserve, especially for Elora. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Through you, sir, can I ask my colleague for clarification? Is that okay? Okay, so Councillor Adams, as much as I hear you saying, I totally am with you, but then what would be the value if you were willing to take it back and put it back into the Gen Pop? Why would you feel, what value is there in separating it? Period. I get the value of doing the project. I'm not sure what you're asking, why you're asking for that.
Through you, Chair. I think that was what I was trying to understand too. And I think in your last comment there, I also picked up, because on that report, the attachment that we received today, it doesn't really align with the reserves we have now. And there was like a lot of different ones. So that's a trend we're moving away from. So when I had read that and I was seeing like all these detailed kind of reserves, it's like, okay, well, you know, we potentially have after this feasibility. So why not this one? But I understand from your comments just now that that's not the trend that we want to go towards. So it's also just me and understanding and becoming more aware of this process here.
Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. My question's a little bit different. When I'm looking at the vehicle replacement reserves and equipment replacement reserves and maybe even facility replacement reserves, have we started for the balances that we're wanting to have in there, like the environmental lens on all of that from our perspective of electric? Just because of looking at the ice resurfacer from earlier, there was a $40,000 over what a non-electric one was going to be. Like, are we taking that into account for some of the balances that we're wanting to see in there so that we can cover what we are needing for future? Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Councillor Jefferson. We haven't earmarked any dollars from an environmental or an electrification lens at this point. From a replacement schedule standpoint, we're looking strictly one for one. I think as we progress down this road from an environmental sustainability standpoint, we'll be looking at that and seeking council direction in terms of how far do we want to go down that path in terms of our fleet replacement policy.
Any further comments, Councillor Welton and then Councillor Adams?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Waters. Just question might be for Dan or Adam, but I'm just curious if we know there's been noise lately on the provincial level around development charges and potential changes here and there to how they're handled. So I'm just curious if there's any risk, and again, I'm looking at it from a Parks and Recreation process or perspective, is there any risk that you see in the future from anything you've heard that might put this at risk in terms of being able to use those development charges for Parks and Recreation facilities? In that case, I would argue there might be a case for putting a dedicated reserve to protect some funds for Parks and Recreation. So just curious on kind of your read of the tea leaves there.
Sure. I can take a stab at it, and then if CAO Wilson cares to comment further, I'll defer to him. But as it stands now, it sounds like much of the kind of more invasive implications of the DC changes that have been proposed historically are starting to be walked back a little bit. For example, like studies were previously being out. They're now back in. The phase-in has now been removed as well in terms of the 5-year phase-in. So that has been walked back some. In terms of the core service provision, I would suggest it's highly improbable that they would start touching on that at this point. But again, that's more of a senior level government decision, and that's something I'm not particularly party to, but I haven't heard any rumblings that that would be the case.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. This question might be for Colin, potentially. The Streetlights Reserve, Capital Reserve. I was just looking for clarification. Is this where, when we had talked about the parking strategy coming forward, and we talked about kind of those lower value items that might work towards improvements, and we talked about the improvements to the lot, which parking lot was that? Behind Fergus, and you had mentioned that there was some light standards that were currently out, and improving the lots might improve like space. Is this where, and you had spoke that there might be some improvements that could be made. Is this the reserve that we'd be looking to pull those from?
Through Mayor Waters, yeah, potentially, yeah. The streetlight reserve, funds replacements, improvements to our streetlight network. So, some of the parking lots we've discussed in the past. We're looking at the St. George Street lot right now, and St. Patrick, just to see if there's some opportunities there. But yeah, this would be a potential funding source for sure.
Any further comments or question for Adam? Okay. Oh, yes, Councillor Wilton.
One last question. Thank you, Mayor Waters. I'm just curious what the cash in lieu parking reserve fund only has $41,000 and change in it. It seems that that's low. Are we adequately kind of capturing that cash in lieu for parking, or how does that work? Or was some spent in some big spend at some point? So just curious about that one. Thank you.
Really a fantastic Brett question. I'm not sure, Mariana, would you care to take a stab at that one, or? Okay. That's certainly something we can look at, but certainly something that is funded through the planning process and planning and building process, I would suggest. But we can certainly take that away and respond to you.
Okay, any other further comments, questions? Okay, thank you, Adam. Seeing none. Recommendation that the Council of Township of Central Wellington adopt a reserve and reserve fund policy outlined in a report core 2024-26 dated May 13, 2024, and that the Council of Township of Central Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to sign a bylaw with respect to this policy, and that the recommended transfer between reserves as of December 31, 2023, as outlined in report core 2024-26, dated May 13, 2024, be approved and posted as of January 1st, 2024, and that any transfers between reserves required as a result of 2024 transactions related to the updated policy be made by staff. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Jefferson, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? So moved. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go through the bylaws. There was something here pertaining to Councillor Jefferson that, so I'm going to go through all the other ones first, and then we'll come back and vote on that second bylaw. So bear with me as I read through these, please. 2024-17, a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a lease agreement for concession services between the corporation of the Township of Centre Wellington and Something Freshy, Sharon Campbell. Next one, 2024-19, the bylaw to exempt part of Block 16 within Plan 61M -20 or 227 block control provision of the Planning Act, Ria Drive, BD Hollow subdivision. Next bylaw, 2024-20, a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a non-exclusive licensing agreement between the Corporation and Township of Centre Wellington and the Grand River Conservation Authority. Next bylaw, 2024-21, a bylaw to establish a reserve and reserve fund policy and repeal bylaw 2023-40. Recommendations that bylaws 2024-17, 2024-19 through to 2024-21 be read first and second and third time and pass signed by the mayor and clerk and the corporate seal affixed. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Adams, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. And then and if do you have to leave or can just sit back or yeah?
I would just yeah.
Yep. Okay, and then we come back to 2024-18, a bylaw to amend bylaw 6000-23, being a bylaw to regulate the parking and stopping of vehicles on highways, public parking lots, and in some instances, private property within the township of Centre Wellington. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Evoy, seconder on that. Councillor Wilton, any further comments, questions? No, seeing none. All those in favor? So moved. You can come back and join us. Okay, and then item number 10, bylaws, a third reading, 2023-91, a bylaw to authorize a franchise agreement between Corporation and Township of Centre Wellington and Enbridge Inc. First and second readings as of December 18th, 2023. Recommendation that a bylaw 2023-91 be read a third time and passed and signed by the mayor and clerk and corporate seal affixed. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Craddock, any comments, questions? All those in favor? Notice of motions. Motions where notice have been given. Confirmatory bylaw. Okay, a bylaw to confirm the actions of council, recommendation of the bylaw 2024-22 to confirm the proceedings of council. Its meeting held May 13, 2024, be introduced to first, second, and third and passed in open council. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilton, seconder on that. Councillor Evoy, any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? So moved. And then a move, who would like to adjourn this? Who would move to adjourn that? Councillor Wilton, seconder, Councillor McDonald. Any other comments or questions on that? No. Seeing none. Okay, all those in favor? Thank you very much and have a good evening.